The EU has readied plans for tariff retaliation, but will it use them? The European Union has prepared a list of $84 billion worth of US imports, including Boeing aircraft, bourbon whiskey and cars, that would be hit with retaliatory tariffs if President Trump's plan to impose a 30% duty from the 1st of August go ahead. But with European governments still keen to keep President Trump on side over other issues, are they really willing to use them? Vicky Pryce is Chief Economic Advisor to the CEBR. Vicky, the EU is clearly reluctant to retaliate, isn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, what it has been doing for quite some time, not just negotiating. In fact, for a while, it had offered President Trump zero tariffs on industrial products coming into the EU, but that seemed to have been sort of forgotten, temporarily at any rate. So who knows exactly where we'll end up. But what it has done is it has looked at particular aspects of trade, such as steel and aluminium, where, of course, there are tariffs imposed already by President Trump, and said they would retaliate, worth up to 21 billion of imports on steel and aluminium by August the 6th or on August the 6th if there is no agreement. But we'll continue to discuss what they might do on other items. And I think you're quite right. I mean, there's a whole range of products where they're thinking of retaliating. And I know there have been discussions between the various countries where there's been disagreements as to which items to include. So the Irish weren't particularly keen to look at pharmaceuticals. And also we've seen possibility of tariffs being imposed on bourbon coming in, on vehicles coming in. But the real big issue, which is still hanging in the balance and will for some time, is even if there is some agreement on overall tariffs, will there be some increase in tariffs on pharmaceutical products on which so many countries in Europe depend in terms of their exports to the US?
If they do retaliate, how serious could the economic impact be for Europe?
Well, the most important thing for Europe is, of course, that they don't get the tariffs imposed on them from the US. But of course, if they retaliate, then President Trump has said that he would retaliate again and raise tariffs even more. So trade wars are not fun. And what we have been seeing is that there is already a bit of an increase in inflation in the US because of the tariffs, and it would be worse for them. So that's an issue. So interest rates may not come down as fast. But also in Europe, the trade economists will tell you that actually then means less growth and actually deflation, or at least less inflation in Europe. Of course, there could be a reaction by the ECB, particularly in the Eurozone and other countries in the EU with their own independent central banks. They could be reducing interest rates further and faster as a result. But I think it will be bad news for both the US and the EU if that were to be the case. What the EU is, of course, trying to do now is looking at other areas where they can work a lot more closely. There have been talks about working more closely with South Korea and others. So new trade alliances are developing every day, in fact. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up.
There has, though, been a huge jump in US tariff revenue and thus far a muted impact on US inflation. Is President Trump getting what he wanted from the tariff policy so far?
Well, he is looking definitely at tariffs as being one way in which he can counter the tax cuts and certainly the loss of revenue that there may be because of his new enormous bill that has now been passed. So that's one of the issues. And yes, indeed, what we are seeing is that he's collecting more from tariffs. Now, of course, we might end up in a situation where he does not get as much as perhaps he had been anticipating because there have been already agreements with China and others. But what we're seeing without any doubt is that on average, tariffs have now gone up in the US. Which means, I think the average must be about 15% from about 2.5% where it was before, but that makes quite a big difference in terms of what you collect. The question, of course, is, are there going to be as many imports coming into the US as was the case before, or because of price increases, there will be less of a demand for that? Well, that will affect, of course, how much, in fact, he collects.
That was Vicky Pryce of the CEBR. Don't forget, you can watch more videos on Reuters.com.